Good morning. We continue on today in 1 Peter chapter 2, today in verse 14 beginning. Again, we're right in one of our favorite sections of Scripture, our responsibilities toward government and honoring our leaders. We love that. Don't worry, it'll get better. We go to slaves next. And then we go to suffering unjustly. Then we go to responsibilities of husbands and wives. Okay, so Peter tells us these things that we as Christians need to know. As we had the verse from Titus this morning in our adult Bible class out here, this proper behavior that adorns the doctrine of God and is the right way to be and the right way to live. So we began last week in 1 Peter 2:13 as we saw, and again, all of this is based on the fact that we're a new people. We who were not a people have been given mercy that we might proclaim the excellencies of Him who called us from darkness to His marvelous light. That was chapter 2, verse 10. This is all based on the new birth of chapter 1, verse 23, by the word of God that was preached to us. That's 1 Peter 1:25, and that we, as newborn babes, are growing by the word in this doctrine. And so we came to the point of government, and last week we read verse 13, and we saw that all human authority was of God. Verse 13, submit yourself for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether as to kings, as one in authority, or governors, as those sent by Him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those that do right. For such is the will of God, that by doing right you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. Act as free men. Do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as bondslaves of God. Honor all people. Love the brotherhood. Honor the king. So last week we looked at the first one of those, that all human authority was God's. And we also took a while to think about, conceptually from the Old Testament, about the aliens who lived in Israel. How the aliens were still subject to the laws of Israel to some degree. They were not a law unto themselves. And we saw that there was responsibilities Israel had to them, and also that they had to Israel and the community around them. And so that's where we still are in considering being aliens under the governmental authority that we're aliens and strangers under. Though we're natural born, most of us I believe here, though we're natural born citizens and though we're culturally Americans and we fit here as much as we fit to any culture of this world, still we are aliens and strangers. And so God gave these governments, and the authorities were from God. So there were every human institution, kings and governors. Now then, we continue on in verse 14, and we note that those governments, those kings, those governors, those in authority, that they have responsibility to us and to I went one too far. So instead of that being all up there one at a time, it'll all be up there just at once. That's the whole lesson already. So you see where we're going. Verse 14, their responsibilities of punishment and praise. Then the rest is our responsibilities. So we got their responsibilities and we got our responsibilities. Now this is not a treatise on government. As a matter of fact, it's two phrases on government as far as their responsibility. They are to punish evildoers, and they are to praise those who do what's right. You know, Paul asked that we would all pray in 1 Timothy 2:2, that we could pray that we lead a tranquil and quiet life with godliness and dignity. Well, when gangs roam the streets, when it's mob rule in the streets and byways, it's hard to have a quiet life with dignity. And so we need government to do that punishment of evildoers business. One of the greatest evils that we have is when the government is the evildoers, that the government's in league with the evildoers. And so we think about all kinds of self-overlord type governments where the people in charge rule for themselves. And we have some particular names for that if you're into political things, like an oligarchy, where the elites rule for themselves and for their benefit. Or when the low-class people get in charge and do that, we call it a kleptocracy, a rule by the criminals, where the organized crime and the organized government look an awful lot alike. And sometimes they use the same muscle. Russia, I think, is a pretty decent example of that kind of self-overlording government. They appoint themselves as overlords, and they rule for their own benefit. What do they do to evildoers? Well, it depends. Are the evildoers one of their people or not? And so that does not meet the divine responsibility. And they're also to do, the second part, the praise of those that do right. And so exactly in what way the government might punish those who do wrong, exactly what way they might praise those that do right, again, it's not a long treatise, it's just those two phrases, but that is the government's responsibility to commend, to promote, to reward right and good behavior. And this is a problem with, again, we see it in oppressive governments. To do good things, people have to go around the government. And that's a government not meeting its responsibilities. But further, how that is organized, how that is to be done, it's not a matter of divine instruction. So, in some ways, a nice benevolent monarchy, where the benevolent monarch was a sound Christian. That might be the best form of government. Of course, then we get his son in charge afterwards, and who knows what that'll be like. So that's one of the problems with monarchy. It's, you know who your next ruler is going to be, but sometimes you know who your next ruler is going to be. Or you have, like we do, we have some form of democracy. There are more or less direct forms of democracy. There are parliamentary systems and republican systems like ours, and we get what we vote for. Oh boy. Again, the problem is not the form. The problem is, at times in meeting these responsibilities, it's the people in charge of it. Because too often, those in power think that the power is for their own good. That the rule is for themselves, not the rule for the benefit of the people. But it's a universal rule of God that all authority is given for the benefit of those under authority. Does the husband get authority in the family for his own benefit? Or does he use it to help and protect and support his wife and his children? We know what he should do with his authority. We know not all husbands do. In churches, why do elders have authority? For the protection and the promotion, the oversight of the flock, not for themselves. Do we know those who've led churches to their own benefit, not to the benefit of the congregation? Certainly. And so we know it, government and family and church, those who don't meet their responsibilities. But this is what Peter says is the responsibility of government. This is what God put them here for. This is their legitimate place to punish evil and to praise or promote that which is right. From the Proverbs, we have this. Proverbs 8 about wisdom speaking as a wise counselor. Proverbs 8:14 beginning, counsel is mine and sound wisdom. I am understanding, power is mine. By me kings reign and rulers decree justice. By me princes rule and nobles all who judge rightly. So wisdom causes right judgment. Wisdom causes decrees of justice. Wisdom promotes a true and good power. And so I know some of our libertarian friends are tempted to say because of the corruptions of government, we'd be better off without it. Well, if you think government's bad, try being without one. We do need a structure of government to do these divinely appointed things. So this is why Peter gives us as a reason for obeying government. Now, I do like this, that I do have the reason given. Does God always explain the reasons why he tells us to do a thing? Not always. Sometimes God does explain, this is for your good, or this is how it's good. And in the case of submission to government, we have some explanation of it, and this is the explanation. The responsibilities of government. But as I say, it's not a treatise on government. As a matter of fact, it's just 2 phrases. And if I count up all the little words even, including the articles and the prepositions here, it's about 11 words. The 2 things that are covered in my English translation here in about 11 words. That's it. Now then, the rest of the writing of Peter and the rest of our explanation is not on government. It's on us. Because, well, even if I did have a long treatise of condemning government, and I don't know, I know people who just write those in their spare time because they enjoy it. But even if we did that, what could we change? Well, what could we do? And so, yes, here's your government, here's your 2 obligations. Punish evil, praise right. Now, let's spend some time on our part. And so that's their responsibility. The next 3 verses are our responsibility. And verses 15 and 16 talk about us as slaves of God, but also free men. For such, verse 15, is the will of God, that by doing right, you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. Act as free men, and do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as bondslaves of God. So, thanks be to God, we are free to be his slave. Isn't that what Peter's saying? That here we are, here's our position. That under the will of God, first, we do what's right. That's almost a truism. When did God ever ask you to do wrong? What thing did you ever do wrong that was by the will of God? It's the will of God that you live right. And sometimes we just need that reminder. You need to be this good citizen under this government later. You need to be this good husband or wife in the family. You need to be the person you ought to be. And just like your mother said, it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. Am I relieved from being a nice and decent person because other people aren't nice and decent? No. We went over that in kindergarten, but some of us have done our best to forget. It doesn't change our responsibility. So God's way is for us to do right. From the book of James, this, James 3:13. Who among you is wise and understanding? Well, I'd like to be wise and understanding, right? I'll try to be that. Well, then it says, verse 13, continuing, by his good conduct, he should show that his works are done in gentleness that comes from wisdom. Oh, you claim to be wise. Well, how about we have wise and gentle conduct? Now, there's a lot of ways that people define what a stalwart and faithful Christian is. Not enough of them define it by this, that it's wise and gentle conduct. Works that are done in gentleness coming from wisdom. Good conduct. Wise action from wisdom. All right, so by that it says you may silence, or you might muzzle, gag, stop the mouths of foolish and ignorant men. So one thing that Christians are quite often accused of, and especially in this day, they were accused of being disloyal to the government. They were accused of not being good citizens. And of course, they wouldn't bow the knee to Caesar, and that got them at times into places of persecution. But there's other times where Christians talk about King Jesus and his rule for our life. And we follow him. And when Christians in full understanding and good conscience say, we follow God as our highest authority, governments that want to be the highest authority get nervous. And there's a lot of times where there is persecution of Christians because they say they follow a higher authority. Again, best illustrated at times in the extreme. What if we were in North Korea and we told Mr. Kim Jong-un, whatever's, we told him, you are not the highest authority, sir. All right, what would happen? That would not be good. Now again, we're supposed to honor the king. We're supposed to be respectful, right? But we say that, you are not the highest authority here. God is the highest authority. Well, these people don't understand what we're doing and what we're about. And so they are foolish and they are ignorant about Christianity. And when they have bad ideas about what Christians are, and then Christians act like they're lawless or act like they're above the law, then that doesn't silence that kind of talk, it spreads it. And so the obligation is to silence the foolish by doing what's right. You do what's right by the will of God. And so yes, the will of God is our highest and greatest authority. But the will of God and following God doesn't mean we can ignore human authority. We do what's right. And as we talked about last week, there are some exceptions to following human authority. We talked about the Hebrew midwives. We talked about Daniel in the lion's den, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the worshiping the idol. We talked about the forbidding of preaching in Acts 4. There are times when we must disobey a civil government. But is that the daily life? No. But there are some who would claim to be Christians, and their daily life is in opposition to government. Their daily life is in opposition to all kinds of rules and regulations and various things that governments have set up, some of which we might think is overreach. If we were in charge, we wouldn't do that. Some of which we would think, well, that's perfectly fine, but those guys don't. But we have to do what's right. Doing what's right is the will of God for us. Verse 16 continues, act as free men. So we are free. We're free in Christ, right? John 8, 31 and 2. Jesus said to the Jews who believed in him, if you continue in my word, you are really my disciples. You will know the truth will make you free. And verse 36, if the Son sets you free, you're free indeed. So we are free. We're free from the power of the devil. We're free from the grip of sin on us. We're given great deal of freedom. Galatians 5, for freedom Christ set us free. And then he says, stand firm then and don't submit again to the yoke of slavery. And so Christians are to be and act as free men, not those who willingly go, in that case, to slavery of the doctrine of the law. But this freedom and in slavery, freedom and from slavery is from lust and corruption, from all kinds of sinful things, that we can wholeheartedly serve God. Not that we can, get away with not paying our taxes, or various ordinances that we find noisome, that we don't like, and we're just not going to do that. No, we're going to follow the regulations of the government, Peter says, while being free men toward God. Romans 6, again, on this kind of freedom. Romans 6, 17 and 18. But thanks be to God that although you were slaves of sin, you obeyed from the heart that pattern of teaching to which you were handed over. And having been set free from sin, you became enslaved to righteousness. And so, again, we're slaves of righteousness. Our obligation is to do what's right. And our obligation and our commitment to faithfully before God to always do what's right, how often would that set us at opposition to the government? Well, it wouldn't be small things. It wouldn't just be a lawlessness. It wouldn't just be a defiance. That is a problem with some parts of our culture, that defiance is built into it. It's part of our cultural heritage. It's part of our character. There are things where defiance is baked in. And the strange thing, the people who gave us our government were steeped in defiance, and gave room in our government, thankfully, for some pushback against it and make a change. But we as Christians need to have the mind of God, not the mindset of defiance as our primary way to view the world and to view our relationship to authority. One more on this, Galatians 5:13. For you were called to freedom, brethren, only don't turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. So Paul here in Galatians 5, just like Peter here in our reading, told us we've been called to freedom. Freedom for right, freedom to help, freedom to serve, freedom to be devoted to God. Not just a freedom, to you can't tell me what to do. So we're free to be more fully told by God what to do. I remember when I was in junior high, and again, forgive me, I went to junior high in Oklahoma in the 70s. I probably had a lot of bad things. But one of our favorite things was somebody would tell somebody to do something, and we'd bow up and not do it. And what would we say? No, this is a free country. It was just some little tiny act of defiance. It was a violation of some social norm, violation of whatever rules govern a junior high, those kind of things. But we would defiantly say, no, this is a free country. This is not the attitude of freedom that this is trying to engender to us. It is a freedom in service to God and others in good conscience that is what Peter and Paul are giving us. Last thing on this, Psalm 119:45, because we can't have a sermon without a psalm. Psalm 119:45, I will walk at liberty, for I seek your precepts. Seneca the Roman said, liberty consists of obeying God. That's very close to what the psalmist says. Liberty is to seek God's way. That is the best good way for us. So then we come to our concluding statement. Just in case you thought there was some wiggle room, just in case you thought, well, there's got to be some exception to this. Verse 17, honor all people. Sounds a lot like Romans 13:7, render all to what is due. Paul went on to say, tax to whom tax is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. And so give people their respectful due. Honor all men. I think about so many confrontations. Either you read them on social media or you see them on the news, you see clips of them spread around, and the people are just being willfully defiant and ugly toward one another. They're being as provocative as they can to the other person. They get in their face, they give them a minor shove, they stick a camera in their face, they do all kind of provocative things, and then when the other person responds, what happens? Then they act like there was some unprovoked, just a horrific attack upon my person and my dignity. No, you provoked that, you deserved it. I would have pushed into traffic sooner, I think, But no, we can't do that. Don't push them into traffic, especially if there's cameras around. Don't do that. But don't you feel like these people deserve it? They're trying to get a reaction, but the scriptural way is to the best of your ability, don't get into any of that. Honor all men. Honor everybody. And again, that's andros, the common men, the generic men. That means humanity. That doesn't mean just males, right? Honor all men. That's male and female both. Honor everybody. Treat everybody with some measure of respect. Treat everybody, well, what did Jesus say? Treat them the way you want to be treated. So honor. And then that's everybody. So everybody gets a respectful and honorable treatment. But then the brotherhood. Love the brotherhood. And so if it's your brother, if it's a fellow saint, if it's another believer, then we've raised the level of obligation. It's not just that we're respectful, but we're in some way affectionate. We're some way kindly disposed to them, that we have warm feelings, that we have true seeking out the best for them. It's like we had in the prior chapter, 1 Peter 1:22. since you have in obedience to the truth purified your souls for a sincere love of the brethren, fervently love one another from the heart. So we already had in the last chapter that brethren get sincere love and fervent love. And so this attitude of defiance, of you can't tell me what to do, it's a free country, all that. This attitude, not only do we take into the civic realm, do we take into the community, sometimes we bring it into the meeting house. And it's especially unfitting there. That here is a place of mutual love and respect. And somebody is instructing us, if they do instruct us in the will and way of God, then we're going to bow up at that. But also the restraint there, right? The restraint that we would have there. I kind of expect the government to tell me things I don't want to do, things that really aren't for my good. I kind of expect the government to do things that are misguided. Mercy, if the government's intentions, half the time came true rather than the actual policy, we'd probably be a lot of times better off, because the government wants to do this, but what they actually do is that. But in the brotherhood, in the meeting house, one, we're not bowing up when we're being told things that are by the word, but also we're not putting on people the kind of things that government puts on people. How many things does the government put on you? How many laws are you going to have to obey just to get home? All right? But in the brotherhood, should we be putting laws like that on people? That's part of love, is to not burden people. And so when it comes from God, we receive it. But if it's not from God, we don't bind it. Right? That's part of the love. And isn't that refreshing? Wouldn't that be refreshing if that truly came to be, that from the world of obligation and heavy-handedness, and if you don't obey the government, eventually they'll send guys with guns after you, right? I mean, even to something as minor as a parking ticket, you can escalate that into something with a gun, because they just gave you a citation. What's the big deal? Well, I didn't pay it. Oh, well, then they came for my car. Well, I objected to that. Pretty soon there's guys with guns involved. The government is very heavy-handed all the time in all its ways. And if you don't do what the government says, it's coming down on you. You come to the church, you come to the meeting house. What if you get the same kind of hammer laid on you there? No. We should have love here and support here. Yes, we have instruction here and admonition here. We have reproof here, but only of the things of God, which are obviously for our good. And we don't add all these other things like this, putting law and regulation and additional things, that if you violate these rules, then here comes the heavy hand. It's not like that. It shouldn't be like that. This should be the place of love. So, with our community, with everybody, we're honorable. With our brethren, we're loving. Toward God at all times, we fear. So the godly fear, the reverence, right? That fear of the Lord that's the beginning of knowledge. Or the fear of the Lord that's the beginning of wisdom. Both those from the Proverbs. That fear of the Lord, there's about 15 different things in the book of Proverbs that the fear of the Lord brings. So the Lord we always fear. We always respect Him above and beyond all. And again, just to make sure you got it, honor the King. And so we have this freedom. But again, it's free to be bondservants of God. It's free to be the honorable people that God calls us to be. So in your freedom, knowing God is first and foremost, and He is the one we fear above all else, Peter says, honor the King. This is not an exception to that. From the Proverbs, Proverb 24:21, I'm reading from the English. The true nature of Christ and His followers is those who honor God and do what's right. And if you honor God and do what's right, the conflict with community and government, the next segments about family, the problem should greatly lessen. They should greatly lessen. And so, in doing this, bring praise to God. With that, we'll close for today. Again, next time we move on to the servants and instructions there. We have in this both comfort and admonition. Admonition to do right, comfort that God has a plan, that God has a way, that God has an order for us in lives where, as Jeremiah said, we can't direct ourselves. It's not in us to direct our steps. Here we have God's direction for us, for our good. With that, then we'll close and ask if you need to come to the invitation today, confessing Christ or confessing sin to return to Him. You need to come to the invitation. You can come now as we stand and sing.